listening to Wildlife Quests, a travel and wildlife podcast where we meet explorers, conservationists, and adventurers who go beyond. Join me as we uncover untold stories of nature, the people protecting it, and share the journeys that connect us all. My name's Will. I hope you enjoy this episode. Imagine a species so rare, so unique, it exists nowhere else on Earth. Now imagine that species vanishing before our eyes. Hector's and Māui dolphins are facing a silent extinction, and Christine Rose has made it her mission to stop that from happening. Today, we dive into their story. First off, thank you for joining me today, Christine. And I wanted to start by asking you to describe to the listeners a bit about Māui and Hector's dolphins, perhaps their personality traits, their appearance, because I'd never heard of Hector's dolphins, and especially not Maui's dolphins, until I came to New Zealand.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about my favourite subject, Māui and Hector's dolphins. They are the world's smallest dolphins, only found here in New Zealand, nowhere else in the world, so that makes them really special. But they're also the most beautiful dolphins in the world. And they're special because they've got a rounded fin. That rounded fin that's compared with the Mickey Mouse ear, that's a Māui dolphin. But Māui and Hector's can't be told apart just by looking at them. So they're this beautiful grey colour with the black rounded fin. Because they're really small, they're only between 1.2 and 1.5 metres long. And when they're calves, newborn calves are about the size of a rugby ball. So classic New Zealand example, size comparison, rugby ball, and absolutely beautiful. And they're an inshore dolphin. And so we're so lucky that in many beaches around the country, you can stand there and look out to sea and see these little dolphins in the surf. So, it's been a real pleasure for me as a dolphin advocate. There's only a couple of beaches around the South Island, for example, where I haven't seen Hector's dolphins. I do spend a lot of time looking, and I've got my eye in because I know what to look for. But they're just such a treasure, and they're a treasure here in New Zealand and a treasure to the world. And that's why it's such a tragedy that they're being killed, wiped out by the fishing industry in trawl and set nets.
Thank you. So that kind of brings me on to what you're actually doing as well. So perhaps you could just explain a bit about what got you into being part of that defender team for Māui's and Hector's dolphins, and what sparked that passion? Because I believe you've been doing it for 30 years, is that right?
When I first came kanohi ki kanohi, or eye to eye with Hector's dolphins, it was love at first sight. And gosh, they're so small, intelligent, curious, charming, and friendly, and very approachable. And because, I had this interest in whales and dolphins since I was young and thought that they were going to be extinct, And so by the time I became an adult and realized that I could go and visit them in places, first off on tour boats, without realizing that actually tourism does have a negative impact on the dolphins, but then in my kayak. And I took up kayaking and overcame my fear of the ocean and the big sharp teeth creatures in it, because I wanted to get close to nature. And then once I discovered that, you could actually just launch your kayak and there with wildlife, and came face to face, kanohi ki kanohi, with the Hector's dolphins, I realized at the time I was a local body politician and I was studying politics and philosophy. And so I had access to power and a knowledge, of, the way power works and also what is right, so it was about ethics and power and who has it. And my obligation as a, conscientious participant in nature and civil society was to do something for the dolphins. And so I, my husband and I, we'd been out on this boat, this tour boat, seen Hector's dolphins, and was like, wow. And I thought, oh, well, that's really good, and drove away. And then my husband went, why are we driving away? We've got a kayak, we know where the dolphins are. Shouldn't we just go back? And I was like, oh, can we turn around? And it was like 100 k's back to Akaroa Harbour and over a really big hill. And we launched the kayak and we spent the next week with the dolphins just playing around us and being very active. And then, so I went back year after year after year after year, and my life has revolved around those dolphins. And through that time, I have become more aware of the threats that they face, but also The dolphins in Akaroa Harbour, for example, are moving much further out towards the heads now because of those tourism pressures. And so I started up Maui and Hector's Dolphin Defenders. I ran campaigns around the country through local government networks to get better protection for them, and did manage to get protection for them. And since then, I've never been back on a tour, specifically dedicated to Hector's dolphins, because I know what pressure they put on them now, and do most of my dolphin watching from land. But I still do, kayak just for joy. And if I happen to encounter Hector's dolphins, well, that's my treat. But I now have to sort of forego my gratification of being like pursuing dolphins, because that's just not the right thing for me to do. But I'm rewarded by seeing them from land a lot, and knowing that my work and my advocacy means that dolphins' lives are saved, because, I'm just really dedicated to the dolphins, and they deserve it.
It seems like those two worlds colliding with politics and my love for nature, it is created this perfect tool really to go out and make change. You mentioned that you've managed to get them protected. What does that look like? Because I was looking online, and I saw that you'd managed to have this safeguard. I think it was started at a kilometre out to sea, and then it got further. They agreed further that there would be no fishing zones. Is that what you mean by protecting them?
Yeah, it's interesting because politics and industry and the way those things work, it's in terms of environmental protection, it's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so when I started advocating for Maui and Hector's dolphins, it was thought that set nets were the major cause of death, and they certainly were. But because there were no cameras on boats, the trawl industry could just sort of say, oh, no, we're not killing them, and there was no evidence to the contrary. And so through our work, in particular working with scientists, professors, emeritus professors, Steve Dawson and Liz Slotin, who are like the world experts in Maui and Hector's dolphins, we've managed to get these protection zones in some pretty significant areas, especially against set nets. And so set nets have been pushed out of a lot of the area, but where they haven't been pushed out, they're still killing dolphins. And unfortunately, the power of the...
Sorry, what are set nets?
They can be deployed by small boat operators, and they sit in the water for an extended period of time. And so that's why they're called set, because they just like set and...
Okay, I see.
They come back 12 hours later and, we've killed 5 Hector's dolphins. Damn. Well, we'll chuck them aside and we'll set that net again. And so that was happening. And, so many dolphins were being killed. And so we've got set nets out of Maui habitat on the sort of coastal shores, but not in harbours and not out too far. We are saving lives through those set net bans, but in large parts of the South Island and also in the North Island and the Maui habitat inside harbours and up rivers, it's still legal to set nets. So they are still killing dolphins. And in Kaikoura, for example, set nets killed a heavily pregnant female and another female just within 1 month. So wiping out not just this generation, but future generations too. So where set nets are still allowed, they are still killing dolphins. But it's also clear that now there are cameras on fishing vessels, and we were really agitated to get that happening. Sometimes we're quite lonely voices in that. The cameras on trawlers are, so these are bigger boats, are now showing a 600% increase in deaths on those trawlers. And those trawlers are allowed within 100 metres of shore and in really shallow water. And this is really key habitat for Hector's dolphins. So lots of dolphins are being killed by trawlers, and, there's a lot of power in the industry. So we're pushing against that and trying to avoid any dolphin being killed in a trawl or a set net.
It's probably a continuous battle with government, I'm assuming, to keep putting that pressure on them. It sounds extremely frustrating. But the cameras, so is that something that your team managed to push to get them is that just to be like accountable so you can prove what's being caught?
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
interesting because it's been through different government regimes. So, we've got two main political parties, National and Labor, and National are normally the pro-business party. But a long time ago, they actually said, yeah, we'll bring some cameras on, interestingly. And then Labor, when they were elected in 2017, and the fisheries minister was taking donations from the fishing industry, he was like, nah, no, we'll just push that back. And we called that out as fatally flawed. And so then we sort of got caught in the middle of it because people were going, how dare you criticize Labor? They're not as bad as National. Well, they're not protecting Hector's dolphins. And so finally, at the end of that government's 6-year term, we got cameras on boats. And so they started getting rolled out in 2023. And so it's meant that the fishing industry are now having to report the dolphins that they're killing. And so we've got the evidence, and some fishermen still deny it. We quite often get told that we're liars when we say that these dolphins are being killed, and then we show them, these people, often fishermen, are calling us liars. When we show the evidence that actually the fishermen are now reporting these deaths, these guys will say, well, they're liars. Well, no fisherman is going to lie and say that he's killed a dolphin if he hasn't. More likely the other way around, because that was the way history worked.
Completely.
But yeah, I mean, it's really tragic. And so we now know, after the first annual report on after cameras and this bycatch reduction plan that allows fishing right within 100 meters of shore, we know that. So first of all, that it's a 600% increase in reported dolphin deaths, and there will still be dolphin deaths that aren't reported. We know that 12 out of the 15 deaths within the 2023-24 fishing year, they were killed by bottom trawling. We know that in 4 instances, the fishing vessels killed dolphins and then went back out into these areas and killed more dolphins. We know that most of them were using the fisheries initiatives. They suggested that, they could just go a bit slower and they could use this particular type of net deployment and everything would be okay. And the government sucked it all up and bought it and went, yeah, sure, you can do that. And we know that those methods are killing dolphins. And we wouldn't know that if it weren't for the cameras. And so, continue the rollout of the cameras, which the government is now, this national government is trying to prevent. They're saying, no, we're not going to have cameras in the harbours, and we're not going to have them on the big fishing boats, the ongoing rollout, and they're trying to hide the footage. But we know that it's applying much more scrutiny. We know that more dolphins are being reported, whereas in the past, they just throw them overboard and they just get washed up on a beach with no cause of death able to be ascertained. And we know that this has got to stop.
Yeah, I mean, at least it gives you that then statistics, so it tells you where to channel that focus, and it's you're not just blindly trying to put the blame on someone. You're getting that proof, which is sounds really good progress in that sense. I mean, some of the statistics I found quite scary, actually. With the Maui dolphins, they reckon 54. That is very, very scary, considering they're only endemic to New Zealand, right? So we have to look after them, otherwise we're gonna make them extinct. And Hector's dolphins as well. 15. Is it 15,000 hectares left?
They say
roughly,
between 9 and 15,000, so that's a wide range. And you might say, oh, well, if it was 15,000, that's great. But actually, these populations are like Maui dolphins, so they're genetically and geographically distinct. And in some areas, they're as low as 40 individuals, or even lower. So when the fishing industry and the minister say, oh, there's a whole lot, and there's hectares everywhere, in parts of the South Island, so Queen Charlotte Sound, that population is only 30 to 40 individuals. Curio Bay, where, the dolphins come, it's this beautiful bay, Southland, so the water's really cold, but absolutely gorgeous. And in that area, there's only, I think it's 51 dolphins. Otago, there's 40 dolphins, and 2 were killed by the fishing industry in 2023, I think it was. And so you imagine, like, these are finite populations with little mixing between them. and they're geographically and genetically distinct. They're just like Maui dolphins, they just don't have their own name, although in Māori tradition, they did have their own names. And so those local Māori communities would have really special relationships with the dolphin communities and had local names for them. But then along came Western science and just went, oh, they all look the same, so they're all Hector's dolphins. But actually, they all should have their own name, like Maui dolphins have their own names, and they should be recognised as separate biological units. And actually, Fisheries New Zealand, the government agency, do recognise that they are distinct biological communities, but they allowed two to be killed every year in Otago of a population of 40, and of a population of about 170 on the south coast at Te Waiwai Bay. They allowed two to be killed every 2 years, and they allowed 20 to be killed every year in Canterbury alone. So, this is convenient for them to say, oh, there's 9 to 15,000 of them and everything's okay. And, you can kill at least 50 of them a year across the country. Well, that's not okay, because the science now shows that, the decision makers admit that when they set these fisheries related mortality limits, they didn't take account for the fact that pregnant females, losing them from a small population is like, that's a real bottleneck. It's a funnel to extinction. And so they've been forced by the International Whaling Commission to review some of that, but that's not happening. It's not going to be concluded till the end of 2026. And in the meantime, these dolphins are being killed.
So you mentioned at the beginning around sort of tour guides and stuff. So are there actually trips that you can go out to visit these on boats or kayaks? And if so, why is that bad for the dolphins?
Yeah, tourism contributes about $24.5 million to the Canterbury economy, just the direct benefits of people paying a ticket to go out and watch and swim with Hector's dolphins in Akaroa Harbour. And then there are other tour companies across the South Island that do incidental dolphin tourism, but they're not pursuing the dolphins specifically. But in Akaroa Harbour, it's become clear that on top of the fishing pressures and things like port expansion and pollution and boat strike, that tourism, because, these boats all day are taking these hundreds of people out, dumping them in the water with the dolphins, and the dolphins, they're curious and intelligent, so they're quite interested in these crazy people jumping in the water with them. So they swim over and play, but that takes time from their resting, their foraging, their socialization, and it's also an imposition. It'd be like somebody bringing a tour into your house, and you might want to play host for a little while, but it gets a bit tired. And so, like in the end, if those people don't leave, you're just going to go and find somewhere else to live. And that's what's happening with the dolphins. So they're moving further out towards the heads of the harbour, where they'd prefer to be inside the harbour, where it's more sheltered and it's ideal conditions for them. So they're moving further out, and that's putting them more at risk of other pressures, fishing pressures and the like, and just being tired because it's rougher out there. And so the cumulative impact of all these direct and indirect pressures are really taking their toll on the dolphins. Great for tourism, great for the local economy, really great for people to have this experience. People get close to the dolphins and they just love them. But it makes people a bit crazy. And there's research into that. And the term for it is called acrasia, because people they just want to touch the dolphins and they want to, impose upon the dolphins, and it might be good for the people and their personal satisfaction, but it's not great for the dolphins long term.
So some of the conservation work and the protesting that you've been doing, I was looking online and I see lots of pictures on your Facebook page and your website, which is brilliant, by the way, around lots of people coming out onto the streets. Is it like a community gathering, or do people come from all over to support that protest that you're doing? Because I see all sorts of ages of people, young kids walking around protesting as well. So where does that come from? Is that from people that are on your page and come from all over, or is it just in in your
It's
town?
a really beautiful thing. And one of our aims is to grow a nation of dolphin defenders. And so in our town, or sort of our wider community, there's a lot of support for Maui protection. And it, like you say, it's across ages and it's just so beautiful. But we, dolphin defenders, my husband and I in particular, just had a 2-month trip right across the South Island, East Coast, talking to coastal communities and making that connection between these different local populations of Hector's dolphins and the threats that they all face. And we spoke to thousands of people, and it was so beautiful, the stories that we heard and the connections that we had from people. And I mean, we did stuff like we went to festivals and talked to people. We did protests outside fish processing factories. We went to markets. We did an installation of what 20 Hector's dolphins killed every year in Canterbury look like, laid them out on a beach. That was pretty stark. And I mean, that day there were Hector's dolphins in the surf there on the Christchurch beach. And we had people going, I just saw your dolphins. It's like, they're not just our dolphins, they're everybody's dolphins. And we went to Dunedin and at a big market, and people were flocking to sign our petitions. And in some places, there weren't many people at our events at all. But, across the country, through the time that we've been campaigning for Maui and Hector's dolphins, we've seen this movement grow and people become much more aware. And so when we do school engagement and community engagement, and when we go to where the people are, that there's this, I mean, it's so encouraging. We know that everybody wants these dolphins saved. And so a big part of the way we work is providing a bus for those supporters to get on, because otherwise people are all just standing around going, well, what can we do? And where's the bus? And we're providing the bus so that we're channeling that political movement and that support and that love for the dolphins into a concentrated and directed vehicle for change.
That's amazing. So have you personally been out to see the devastation of, potentially a dead Hector's dolphin caught in there? Have you witnessed that?
I'm really lucky that I've never seen a dead Hector's dolphin. And I mean, that this year we'd just done a protest outside Tallies and Sealord in Timaru, and we call it the Tallies Valley of Death. And, like the trucks were going in and out. They just about tried to run us over, and it was really hostile. And we spoke to a local guy in a house bus thing, and he was like, oh, I just saw a dead Hector's dolphin down the coast. And this little remote place, Waihola Box or something it was called. And we went down these gravel roads, it was like miles away. We're like, we'll go and have a look. And it was actually a dead seal. So, I mean, I was quite glad that it wasn't a Hector's dolphin. But I do prefer my dolphins to be alive and not dead. And I have seen lots of photos of dead dolphins. And I'm surprised I haven't seen any dead ones because, I spend a lot of time at the beach and around New Zealand. And a part of me dies every time I hear about a dead dolphin. And so I think it would be just too much, But yeah. It's grim to know that they do die like this.
So if someone's coming to New Zealand or someone's in New Zealand and wants to see them, Maui or Hector's dolphins, where's the best place to go and how can they do that kind of sustainably?
I recommend that people go to any bit of coastline in the South Island and stare out to sea, and you might not see a Hector's dolphin, but the chances are that you might as well, and have fun looking, and because it's nature and it's wild, and you can't dial up a dolphin and you shouldn't expect to. But there are plenty of places that you can, so Curio Bay. But it's wonderful to be able to stand there and put the effort in and look. I mean, north of Kaikoura, there's a beach called Hapuku, and even just at Kaikoura Township, you can stand on the beach and see Hector's dolphins because they are an inshore dolphin. I mean, we were in Littleton and we went over there because when we did our event at New Brighton Beach, the representatives of this fishing company really bullied one of our volunteers, and they were going, we don't kill dolphins. And so this company, Pegasus Fisheries, 6 Hector's dolphins have been killed in Pegasus Bay in the last, year or so. And this is a company that's crashed 2 boats, one of their trawlers into Banks Peninsula near a marine reserve, and they crashed a boat into a big bulk carrier. So they're dodgy operators, and they were like, we don't do anything wrong. So we went and paid them a visit and took one of our life-size Hector's dolphins, and there was no one there, but, we stood there, in front of their piles of huge trawl nets. And while we were there, we were staring out to sea in Littleton Harbour. We're like, man, there's got to be a Hector's dolphin here. And just like that, there's this little Hector's dolphin in the harbour swimming along. And I think that, that's been the story of our lives. We go there looking, we stand on the land and we look, and sometimes we don't see them, but quite often we do. And I would recommend that people take their chances, don't save your money. Don't put pressure on the dolphins. Don't go out on a paid trip. Sorry, tourist operators, but man, I'm thinking about the dolphins here, and stand on the land and soak up the beauty of New Zealand and the beauty of wild nature, which is not expecting a product to be delivered to you on demand, but wait for those moments in nature to come to you, and the reward will be huge.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, going out to not particularly go to see something, and when you see that, when you're not expecting it, is so much more rewarding. Even from just walking around the fjordlands in New Zealand. I've been here for 6 months, but some of the walks, I wasn't expecting anything, and I've seen some amazing birds, and they're just sitting next to me while I'm having lunch in this forest, and then, like I say, seeing the Hector's dolphins the first time, I couldn't believe they were just literally playing in the surf, like jumping and flipping around in the waves, like so curious as well. They were really incredible. So that my love for Hector's dolphins came from the second I experienced them was just incredible. So so amazing. One of the things that I was thinking about when you was talking about, and I assume there are legal costs. So I was kind of wondering, who pays for this? Who funds it? Is it your organisation through donations?
Well, most of the time, my work has, so I've worked in politics and then in environmental jobs, and that's sort of subsidised my devotion to Māui and Hector's dolphins. And so we've just travelled around the country and talked to people and fundraised, and so it's been through our own contributions mostly. And then but we have had this amazing support too from, of all places, the Australian Fremantle Underwater Film Festival. The organizer there, Tanya Douthwaite, does this fundraising, so the Australians support us. And so she supported us for about 5 years. And we also have a supporter here in New Zealand who's helping fund our work really significantly, and other regular donors now. All this in the last couple of years has got much more, we've got much more capacity. I mean, Stephen and I my husband and I have done this, for love for a long time. And now we finally have a little bit more money that we can, hire people to do our videos for us, and just, build a little bit more support. So, but we do it on the smell of an oily rag, and we are really grateful to the people who do make donations to us, like monthly donations and fortnightly donations, and the people who just help us for free. And I'm very grateful to my husband, because he does all the driving, he does half the paddling, maybe half. He does some of the paddling in our kayak. No, he paddles. He stands there holding signs with me. He's very selfless, and he loves the dolphins too. And, we've got a committee that are really supportive. But we do have to fundraise to do our work, and to produce brochures and, stickers. But I guess I'd say probably, a lot of what we do is for free, and that we're really grateful to anybody who funds us. And we're always happy to accept more donations so we continue doing our work.
That's great. But if anyone wants to help, what's the best way they can help? Place to
So
go.
we're a registered charity. So if people do want to help just by giving us money, then it's tax deductible. Any donation over $5 gets a 30% rebate at the end of the financial year. And if you can't donate with money, then join us on our Facebook page. Spread the word. We really welcome people to spread the word and to join us at events. So we're going to travel around the South Island again next summer for another 2 months, talking to people, and we'll be visiting coastal communities along the way. And when we did it the summer just gone, people offered us places to stay. They gave us meals. They joined us standing on street corners with our signs. And so we really invite people to join us with that at grassroots level. That makes a real difference. So we invite people in whatever capacity they have, sharing our posts, sharing the word, sharing the love, saving the joy, to be dolphin defenders.
Amazing. Thank you. And just a personal thing from yourself, I was going to ask, do you have a particular wow moment? It doesn't necessarily have to be with the dolphins. It can be an experience with another animal, or a view, a walk you've done in New Zealand.
I've got
ideally.
so many. But okay, I'll have to narrow it down. There is one. There are so many, working with kids, having kids come out and have that. They've got their own little handmade signs about saving the joy, saving Māui and Hector's dolphins. That's so fulfilling. Standing there and just looking and seeing a Māui dolphin and her calf. We had a visitor that we'd met in the South Island, and we took him out to the coast here, and there was a Māui dolphin and her calf, But in December, we were preparing for our trip, and so I'm working on my computer and planning to go to the South Island to see Hector's dolphins. And on the Whale and Dolphin Spotting Facebook page that I run, somebody said, I'm sure I saw a Māui dolphin this morning in the Waitemata Harbour, which is near my home. To get to the harbour, it's through Auckland Port. It's the busiest piece of, port water in the country. It's pretty polluted. It's muddy. And I was like, well, I've got to go and check that out. And so Stephen was busy, but I went out there, and our kayak's always on our roof ready to go. And I went, Stephen, there's a report of a Māui dolphin in the upper harbour. It's just not far from my home. We've got to go. So we dropped everything, put the kayak in the water, and we saw this dolphin. And Māui Hector's dolphin, possibly a Hector's dolphin rather than Māui, you can't tell, of course, but there it was, in the Waitemata Harbour, and, we kept a good distance from it. I don't know where it had come from, and it was just one dolphin, a small dolphin, juvenile, by itself in this muddy stretch of water, and so there's no way I was going to get close to it. I just wanted to confirm it was a Māui Hector's and see it with my own eyes. And it hung out in the harbour there and up the sort of river system for about 3 weeks. But for us to sit there in our kayak and see this little dolphin a long way from its home, and even though, Māui and Hector's used to be the most common dolphin and they used to live everywhere, there's never been in modern times a Hector's dolphin up the river like that. And so for us, of all people, to be able to see this little Hector's dolphin and just it'll probably never happen to us again. And, I love it every time I see Hector's dolphin, but to see that and to know that they're out there, and especially this little one, but then I lay awake worrying, oh no, there's set nets up that river, there's boats, there's, container ships out into the harbour. Where's its family? Where's its home? Where's it going to go? Is it safe? I still worry about that. So with the love comes responsibility, but to experience that was mind-blowing and such a special treat and overwhelming, and what a joy.
Oh, that's incredible. And I completely understand how you'd never get bored of seeing the same animal as well, because they are incredible. And the first time I saw them, I was having reoccurring dreams, funny enough, about these dolphins as well. It was just such a vivid emotion when I experienced that, when I met them. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, best of luck with all of the work you're doing. And I'll do my bit in trying to get you out there as well. But thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you.
Really
And,
appreciate it.
I know how it feels, when you meet a dolphin, it is a meeting of the minds in the water. You recognize that they are recognizing us as being sentient and intelligent and all the rest of it. And so we need to honor them with the same acknowledgement. And like when you do see them and meet them like that, it's like, yeah, so powerful. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about them and to share the love.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. Appreciate it. If you're interested in learning more or supporting the Māui and Hector's Dolphin Defenders, you can check out Māui and Hector's Dolphin Defenders Facebook page. And to see some photos of the dolphins, head over to mauihectorsdolphins.org.nz. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to follow or subscribe. Hit the bell icon if you're watching on YouTube because I release weekly episodes. And if you've got a story you'd like to share, head over to wildlifequests.com and I'd love to hear your story. Until then, have an amazing day and I'll see you on the next episode.